Hello everybody, Maven here, and today's video is gonna be a massive one, boys. I can already determine it's gonna take me like 17 hours to edit this video. So anyways, we're going over every single new weapon that has come to Lightfall, at least the ones that we have access to in the API, and I'll be going over my own personal god rolls for every single one of them. So without further ado, let's get to it. Don't forget to drop a like, and hope you enjoy. Alright, so I opted to do a tier list, and you probably saw that in the title of the video. Now there are 33 new weapons here, and if I had to edit each individual one over some background gameplay and snip out multiple things, it would have been a nightmare to edit. But plus, doing it this way is also pretty enjoyable, and I actually like this format, so we're gonna do the tier list. So first and foremost, to be assumed, I do not have every single one of these weapons in their god rolls. I'm just going to use my own personal experience based off of these weapons' archetypes and their statistics and their perk selections to determine whether or not they would be good or bad. But also there are some perks that are new that I have not gotten to try yet. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. Now, is this tier list going to be pertaining to PvE or PvP? Well, it's going to be a little bit of both. I'm just going to rank these weapons based off of their potential sought afterness. And with that, let's get to it. So starting off with the Perpetualist assault rifle, I'm going to put this at the A tier. This is definitely more of a PvP weapon, but it can also be for PvE. So taking a look at the perk selection here, it has mainly PvP perks, and this season, spoilers, but target lock is being put onto a lot of weapons, and I'm very excited about that because if you have not tried target lock in PvP, it is absolutely amazing, and it really ups the consistency and TTK of your weapons and makes them very competitive. So I think that this is going to make this auto rifle pretty good. It's a 600 RPM adaptive frame, and with that target lock, it's going to be one of the best 600 RPM auto rifles. And these things are bound to get buffed eventually, and we'll have another auto rifle meta in PvP again, and this is going to be one of the things you want. And on top of that, it is indeed craftable, so you can get the perfect god roll. And as for PvE, it does have access to a new perk called Hatchling, which spawns a threadling at the target's location on precision final blows, which is pretty neat, and we don't know how good this is going to be yet, but other than that, it does have access to Golden Tricorn and Demolitionist. However, on the downside, it doesn't really have anything good for PvE in the first column. So I think a solid A tier, or you know what? I feel like this list is going to be pretty crazy, so we'll move it down to B tier. So I think it's going to be more of a PvP gun. Next up, we got the Reconnaissance Stasis Bow, and this one I'm going to put at the A tier. I think this thing is pretty special for a couple reasons. It is a precision frame bow with headstone. The Lunulata was a lightweight frame, which is the worst frame. So you're going to get more consistent crystals with that for PvE. So if you're doing a stasis, crystal build for like a high level content like Grandmasters, you're probably going to want this bow. And then for PvP, it does have something pretty special. It is the first precision frame bow to get gutshot straight. Now you might be wondering why that's special, because the Whistler's Whim gets gutshot straight, and as a lightweight frame bow, that allows it to 2-tap to the body, which is a fast TTK for a bow, the fastest in the game. But what's so special about this one is, I'm not meaning to do a shameless plug here, but I did do a video called like this build should be illegal or something, or like this Ariana's Vow video. And I used the Biting Winds as my kinetic bow in that video. It's meant to hot swap with the Dragon Shadow chest piece. But the thing about this bow with gutshot straight doing more body shot damage could make that combo more consistent. Depending on how much damage this will allow us to do to the body with this bow, we can more reliably go body with this bow, hot swap to Ariana's Vow, and body with the Ariana's Vow. It could pick up a lot more consistent kills, I feel, because sometimes it was whiffing if you would hit double body. But gutshot straight might be the savior of that build, and it might be pretty cheesy and broken in Crucible. Next up, we got the Round Robin Strand 120 RPM hand cannon. And this one, I am contemplating putting it in God tier. There's a chance we move it down to S later, but for now, I think this is going to be a very, very strong weapon. 120 RPM. Now, this thing is going to be one of the best Crucible 120 RPM hand cannons because you have the perks Killing Wind and Kill Clip. That's going to make for such an easy 2-tap after every kill. It's going to be scary to go up against these in trials. If you see somebody get a kill with the Round Robin, you better run away. If not, you're going to get popped in like 0.4 seconds. But not only that, but this weapon also has harmony. So if they get a kill with their shotgun or sniper or whatever else they're using, and they swap to this thing, that is also a potential 2-tap. And on top of that, there is this new perk here called Keep Away. Increases reload speed, range, and accuracy when no combatants are in close proximity. Now, I have questions about this perk. It says when no combatants are in close proximity. Guardians do not count as combatants. So does that mean that in Crucible this perk will be active 100% of the time? I do not know. If it's just going to count Guardians as combatants, and still, that's just free range. When you're not near them, you get increased range. That's just rangefinder without needing rangefinder. It's just rangefinder without the zoom, plus the reload and the accuracy. That's going to be very good. That plus kill clip or harmony or whatever. And if you're on controller, you got elemental capacitor for that stability. When you're on void, you got opening shot for more range as well. But for PvE, it also gets a extremely nasty roll of subsistence plus hatchling. Precision final blows are going to make that threadling at the target's location when you kill them, and subsistence is going to make it so you never have to reload, and it's a 120 RPM hand cannon, so getting precision kills is very, very easy. So you don't have to reload, and you're going to be creating threadlings everywhere. It's going to be nasty for both PvE and PvP. And on top of that, it has a new origin trait, Nanotech Tracer Rockets. Landing multiple hits turns the next shot into a homing micro rocket. Do not know exactly what that means, but I'm sure I'll find out in the near future. But yeah, that could be either good or bad. Like, it might be able to screw up your kill in PvP, who knows. Next up, we got the Autumn Wind 540 RPM Rapid Fire Pulse Rifle. This one I am putting at the A tier. Now, I think this thing's gonna shred. It is the Crucible Pulse Rifle, so remember last season we had the Blowout rocket launcher dropping after every single Crucible game. For this season, that is going to be this Pulse Rifle. It's gonna be dropping like candy, so you're gonna get a lot of them. Now, this thing, what it has that's special opposed to other rapid fire frame pulse rifles, I think, is going to be the recoil direction. It has 63 recoil direction, which is high compared to a lot of the other rapid fire frames. So all you really need to do is get arrowhead brake to roll on it, and you put down a counterbalance stock, and that puts you at a perfect 100 recoil direction. So it's going to be pretty consistent. And it does have access to ricochet rounds. Now, it has a pretty good roll of rangefinder plus head seeker. I think that's going to be pretty solid, because where the 540 RPMs really fall flat is the range department, so it's going to be hard to compete at super long ranges against things like the No Time to Explain or the Messenger, but rangefinder can help you compete and give you a few extra meters. And then Head Seeker, of course, is an S tier pulse rifle perk, especially on the faster firing frames like this. Like, I don't think there's very many rapid fire frames that get Head Seeker, if any. I don't remember any off the top of my head, so that's going to be pretty good. And if you don't like Head Seeker, there are a plethora of other damage perks as well. But for PvE, you have access to Demolitionist Adrenaline Junkie, which is always a very strong PvE role. However, pulse rifles aren't really that great in PvE, so I would stick to PvP with this one. It's pretty good. Next up, we have the Battle Scar. This is a revised weapon. Now, this thing, I should have made an extra column here called To Be Determined. However, for now, I'll just put this thing in the C tier. Now, the Battle Scar, I did a video on it recently, actually, just because I was, reviewing obscure weapons, but now it's coming back. It is in the kinetic slots of 450. You know what is also a kinetic in the 450 slot that just came out recently was the Stay Frosty, and looking at these perks, it's very similar to the Stay Frosty, and if you didn't like that in PvP, you're probably not going to like this in PvP because it's very similar. However, what this thing has is a new origin trait called Field Tested, which seems pretty good when you read it. It's like Zen Moment and Rapid Hit had a baby. It's probably going to be not ramping up as quickly as Zen Moment, so I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. I think it reads well, but it's probably not going to be as good as we think it is, but it could be also broken. So that is the one thing it has over the Stay Frosty, in my opinion. But the Stay Frosty also has the best origin trait in the game, which is Omolon Fluid Dynamics. Now, the only thing special besides that about the Battle Scar is it has a new perk called Kinetic Tremors. Kinetic Tremor says sustained kinetic damage on a target emits a shockwave that damages nearby targets. So it could be good for PvE. However, I have not personally tried this perk yet, so I don't know how good it is, but something tells me that it is going to be extremely underwhelming. Now, in my mind, I want this perk to be comparable to something like the Severance Enclosure Explosions or Dragonfly Explosions, but I'm thinking that it's not going to be anywhere near that. So we'll have to wait and see. I do not know if this is really a C tier until we try this perk out. But for now, C tier it is. Next up, we got the Hung Jury, and you already know, Hung Jury is a god tier scout rifle, such a good PvE weapon. And you might be like, well, that's not a new Lightfall weapon. Well, it kind of is, because it does have a new perk on it. They took away, I think it had explosive payload. Instead, they gave it kinetic tremors. Now, Battle Scar is a pulse rifle. Pulse rifles are not good in PvE, but scout rifles, especially for high level content, are very, very good and very, very meta, and I think it can take advantage of kinetic tremors a lot better. This is going to be a very good perk to have for a GM role for your, what do you call this thing? Hung Jury. But another special thing is they're now giving this gun gut shot straight. Now, why is that important? Well, the Hung Jury is a 180 RPM scout rifle. 180 RPM scout rifles in PvP just barely do not pick up the 3-tap. That is why box breathing is really good to pick up the 3-tap. Since it does a lot of damage and just barely not enough for a 3-tap, I'm thinking maybe with gut shot straight, we still have to test this, but maybe with gut shot straight, we can possibly 4-tap to the body. And you know what? With crits, you 4-tap anyways. So if all you have to do is just connect on your opponent 4 times to kill them, no matter what, that could be very strong. It could be a very, very consistent PvP scout rifle. Next up, we got the Nameless Midnight, which is also a 180 RPM kinetic scout rifle, just like the Hung Jury. This one I'm going to put at the C tier, and that is because comparable to the Hung Jury, the Nameless Midnight also has access to kinetic tremors, but I think the Hung Jury would just do that better because, you know, it's an adept weapon. You can put adept big ones on it. However, this one does have triple tap, so you can have that sustained kinetic damage for a longer duration. Also, the old Hung Jury had explosive payload, but it doesn't have it anymore, and this one does. It gets triple tap explosive payload, which is pretty neat for PvE. However, you know what also is a 180 RPM that gets triple tap explosive payload right now that you can craft? The Tears of Contrition. Now, one other special thing about this pulse rifle, or scout rifle, sorry, that I think could be interesting is for PvP, it is the only 180 RPM scout rifle that can get kill clip. And I'm thinking that could be pretty interesting. That can make you do a lot of damage in PvP and be able to go 2 to the head and 1 to the body. So after you get a kill, it is on and you're about to go on a spree. So I think that it could be pretty solid if you like the 180 RPMs in Crucible. Next up, we got the reprised Astra Horizon. The king is back, baby. It is S tier, reprised with new perks. Now, we all know that the best aggressive frame shotgun in the game, you know, that archetype's not meta anymore, but still, it has the surplus opening shot roll and it's adept, it's time lost. And this is the same thing except in the kinetic slot. So if you love the Found Verdict, you can now have it in the kinetic slot. Also, slide shot opening shot, same thing. But this one also has elemental capacitor, so if you're on arc, you get plus 50 handling, so it's going to be like pre-nerf quick draw snapshot. Not to mention the roll of threat detector, snapshot, or surplus snapshot is like pre-nerf quick draw snapshot as well. Also got Killing Wind, that's an option as well. It's not the greatest, but you also have Cascade Point, which is interesting for PvE. Pull it out and just nuke a major on command. We don't know how fast it's going to make your rate of fire, but if it's like a 140 RPM, like the Ikelos shotgun, that's going to be a very fast fire rate, and that's going to be pretty interesting to kill bosses. Next up is the reprised Buzzard. Now, I feel like I'm putting too many weapons in God tier, and everything in me wants to put this in God tier, but I'm going to start putting things in S tier. We'll save God tier for the really spicy stuff. But the Buzzard is one of my own personal favorite weapons in the game. I just had to delete my old Buzzard that I was just saving in my vault forever because I refused to delete it. It's one of my favorite weapons, but after I saw that this thing is getting an adept, I had no choice but to delete it. And the old roll that thing got was 4th times charm Swashbuckler. Swashbuckler is going to be a very solid PvE perk, but now you have like the Walmart Killing Wind and Encore, which also could be good for PvP. There's Perpetual Motion, there's Overflow, but for PvP, you have Rangefinder Perpetual or Rangefinder Encore. And that is going to be very solid because this thing is the same archetype as the Drang. And you know how good the Drang is for PvP, and this thing is going to be the best possible in the kinetic slot as well. Now, the Allied Demand, which is also in the kinetic slot, is the same archetype as the Drang that also gets Rangefinder. But the difference between that and the Buzzard is that this one can be adept. So you get access to those adept mods, which is an absolute game changer. Definitely one of the best sidearms in the game. And I'm going to be going after this one hardcore. Oh yeah, not to mention, Also getting the new perk Kinetic Tremors. If this thing turns out to actually be a good perk, then that is going to be an absolutely disgusting roll right there. Either of these rolls right here. It's going to be a very good aping sidearm for PvE. Next up, we got the Sonuna SI6, which is an Omolon 3 burst sidearm. That one is going in probably the trash tier. It is kinetic, I'm pretty sure. It is a stasis. Yes, it is stasis because it gets headstone. But you know what also gets headstone that is a 3 burst? Peace Bond, and Peace Bond is way better. And this thing also gets Head Seeker, but you know what also gets Head Seeker in the kinetic slot? The High Albedo, and the High Albedo also has better perks in the first column for PvP. I mean, I guess this thing does have Golden Tricorn, which could be solid for PvE as well, but there's a lot of better kinetic options that I would go for rather than an Omolon 3-burst sidearm, because the Omolon frames, in my opinion, don't feel very good. Next up, we got the Bite of the Fox Sniper Rifle returning reprise with new perks. This one, I think I'll put at the S tier. I think this is going to be a very, very good sniper in PvP because it gets the best possible PvP perk combination on a sniper, which is Snapshot Opening Shot. Opening Shot is so powerful that it's banned in scrims, and the role that I kept from before in my vault was Snapshot Rampage. I'm glad I finally get to farm for the actual true god roll. There is another perk this thing didn't previously get, which is Iron Gaze, which gives plus 20 aim assist, which is better than the aim assist on moving target, but I would still stick with Opening Shot because it is definitely better. And for PvE, you have a new perk here called Envious Assassin. Rapidly defeating targets with other weapons is going to allow this weapon's magazine to overflow while it's stowed. Now this thing only has 3 in the magazine, but if you put on a pendant mag, you can overflow it to 8 in the magazine, and that with Vorpal Weapon can make for a pretty solid PvE sniper, but it's still not going to be as good as the Succession, but the option is still there. And also wanted to mention that this thing has Firmly Planted, so stacking with Opening Shot, those are double accuracy perks, making for even easier headshots. Next up, we got the Idukanji Rapid Fire Frame Viced Sniper. This thing, I think I'm also going to put it the trash tier. I'm just not a fan of the Viced snipers, the 140 RPMs. They just feel very bad to me. 140 RPMs in general, even the Praetor's Revenge, just do not feel good to me in PvE, honestly. Now this thing, if you do put on Tac Mag, 4th times the charm, and Focus Fury, or Firing Line, in theory, that could be a very good DPS roll, but are you really going to use a 140 RPM sniper? I mean, this thing also has Headstone with Rapid Hit or 4th times, which could be pretty interesting as well, but still not too exciting. Now, this thing does get a very good Crucible roll of Under Pressure and Opening Shot, which are double accuracy perks, making for very easy headshots, which is disgusting, but at the same time, you can already craft this roll on the Father Sins and craft a perfect god roll, rather than having to use your RNG on farming for this thing. So again, I don't think this weapon really has anything special going for it. Next up, we got the Volta Bracket, or is it Volta Briquette? I don't know, but it is the Strand Kinetic Slot Sniper Rifle. This thing is good, but there are better options, so I'll put it in the C tier. Now, this thing, similar to the Bite of the Fox we just talked to, aggressive frame, kinetic slot, except this one has more zoom. Typically in Crucible, you want less zoom. I know there's some people out there who prefer higher zoom, especially for bigger maps like Eternity or Fortress, but I personally, and most sweaty players, prefer lower zoom. And you got Opening Shot, but what are you really going to use in the first column? You don't have Snapshot. This thing doesn't even get Snapshot in general, which is kind of like required. But you do have Firmly Planted for the double accuracy perks. This thing does have something very interesting though, is that it has Under Pressure in the right column. I believe this is the first gun in history to have Under Pressure in the right column. So again, double accuracy perks, making for easy headshots. I think this is possibly also the first sniper ever to get Subsistence. So you got Subsistence Hatchling or Explosive Payload for PvE, but do you really want to do that? Is that really a good idea? Again, the Succession is in the kinetic slot, and that's just going to be better 10 times out of 10. Next up, we got the Synchronic Roulette Strand 600 RPM SMG. This thing I'll put in the B tier. It does have some really, really good and cool options in the right side column, but it's the left side column that really doesn't impress me for either PvE or PvP. Now again, we do not know how good Keep Away is going to be, especially for something like an SMG, which is meant to be played at close range, but it is a 600 RPM, meaning for, you know, sweatier players who can hit their shots better at longer ranges. For PvP, you might be able to get in range for keep away to proc. If it does work the way we think it does, and if it's even active 100% of the time, that'd be awesome. But in the right side column, pretty much every single perk is awesome. You know, you got this for melee builds. Target lock is nasty in Crucible, like I said. Cascade point could be interesting for PvE, especially paired alongside Envious Assassin. Kill clip, S+ tier PvP perk, and also very good PvE perk. Elements Capacitor, Grey Down Controller, Hatchling could be nutty. This thing just has so many good perks in the right column, and not to mention Nanotech Tracer Rockets, which could be either terrible or very good. Haven't tried it yet, but so many good options here. It's just the first column that disappoints me. So that's why it is in the B tier. If you know that we don't know how that first perk works, keep away. This could very easily be S tier though. We don't know yet. Next up, we got the Immortal, Trials of Osiris, 750 RPM kinetic SMG, going straight up to the S tier. This thing is disgusting. Now, we all know 750 RPM SMGs are currently the Crucible meta. You've seen what's going on with the Ikelos SMG. They're disgusting. They have the most consistent TTK of all the SMG archetypes, and this fits into that category, except it's going to be the best in slot in kinetic. Now, for those who are well versed in Destiny 2, just take a look at every single one of these perks besides Focus Fury. Name one bad perk here. Try it. Just try it. You can't, because every single option on here is amazing. Surplus, Red Detector S tier, Perpetual S tier, Dynamic Slay S tier, Encore just got a buff, it's very good. Keep Away could be broken, we don't know yet. Rangefinder S tier, Target Lock is nasty and Crucible, Kill Clip S tier, Killing Wind S tier, Tap the Trigger pretty good but not S tier. Demolition is pretty good for PvE. Hatchling could be S tier for PvE. Just every single option, man, is disgusting. This thing has a plethora of possible god rolls, and it has the field tested origin trait, which is like that built-in rapid hit Zen moment trait. It is nasty in every possible way you could imagine, and on top of that, it is adept, so you can get adept mods. Like, I cannot stress how disgusting this thing is. It is going to be the most sought after weapon in Lightfall, and when this thing is around in the rotation for the adept in trials, oh, you best believe it is going to be a sweat fest. But on the plus side, when the non-flawless pool is enabled, you're not going to run into KD farmers and people doing carries, because everybody's going to want to go into the flawless pool and farm god rolls of this thing, because it is that gross. And quick correction, this thing is actually strand, not kinetic. Next up, we got the Coronok 22 600 RPM Suros Solar auto rifle, and this thing is going in the B tier because it's pretty much the same thing as this first Solar 600 RPM auto rifle that we talked about. This one was actually strand, by the way, but still, it's kind of the same thing, because we talked about it being a 600 RPM with target lock, but this one has surplus, which I greatly enjoy as well. So that could be a nasty Crucible roll. And it also has incandescent, so it's just going to be straight up better than the Amit with incandescent, except the Amit gets subsistence, which is better. Also has feeding frenzy as well, so it's pretty good for those reasons. But it's just, the downside is it's a Suros frame 600 RPM, just like the Sorrows verse. And the Sorrows verse has got to be probably my least favorite weapon in the entire game of Destiny 2. I just do not like how they feel. Might have been because that thing had terrible recoil direction, but this thing actually has amazing base recoil direction in 73. So you put on Arrowhead Break and boom, it's at 100. So this thing could actually be pretty solid and change my mind on these 600 RPM Suros frames. Next up, we got the Ecliptic distaff. It's hard to say that, by the way. I had to do a few takes to say that. Void Glaive, this thing is going in the S tier. I think this is going to be one of the best glaives in the game. It is the ritual glaive, so you get it from Zavala, Shaxx, and the Drifter, and you get the respective ornaments for each of those. But this thing has so many good perks on it here. 4 really good perks. A movable object. I did a video on the meta glaive from the Val the Disciple raid. I don't remember what it's called right now, but a movable object just lets you sit in the face of a champion and stun it all day, and that's great because we just got Unstoppable Glaive back this season. You got a new perk here, Replenishing Aegis, blocking damage, partially reloads the weapon from the reserves, and that is amazing because, you know, if you're not on Hunter doing a marksman's dodge, it takes a while to reload a glaive, especially if it has something like Extended Mag, but it does have alloy magazine, so it doesn't really matter, but that's pretty good. You have Close to Melee, which is the new perk in the game for glaives. It's one of the new meta glaive perks. So you just get a precision kill with the projectile, and you get a 30% glaive melee buff for 10 seconds. It's very strong for glaive DPS. But then on top of that, you got another new perk called Destabilizing Rounds. So that final blows are going to cause the nearby targets to become volatile. So you run into a group of ads, you shoot one of them dead with the projectile, everything becomes volatile, you melee the next guy, and then boom, suddenly a chain reaction of volatile explosions kills everything around. And on top of that, if you're on Gearfalcon's Hunter and you shoot that glaive projectile at that first ad, not only do the surrounding ads become volatile, but the one you shot becomes volatile. So then you just go throw out a glaive melee and suddenly a chain reaction of volatile explosions will kill the whole area. It's going to be a very solid glaive for Void Hunter with Gearfalcons mainly, but also just for everything in general. Next up, we got the returning, reprised, harsh language Void Grenade Launcher that I think should be S tier, but me personally, I love GLs. I'm putting it at God tier. This thing is extremely reprised because they completely just changed its frame. It used to be a normal GL, and now they made it a wave frame. And wave frames are extremely meta right now. Now, this thing's perk selections are very similar to that of Wilderflight, except wave frame. It also has the new perk Envious Assassin, so you get kills with your other weapon, it'll overflow this thing's magazine. So you'd be able to get 2 in the magazine just by getting kills with your other weapon. So also in a way, this is kind of like built-in auto-loading holster, which is awesome. And then it also has the new Destabilizing Rounds perk, which we just mentioned on the glaive. Now I have questions about this perk, all right? Now my question to Bungie here is that if you shoot this GL at a group of ads, like for example here, we'll say 3 ads. You shoot this GL, the wave hits 3 ads. Will the game process quick enough that the first ad that the wave touched died, making the next 2 volatile, so when the wave continues and hits the other 2 ads, will they explode with the volatile? If that works the way that we think it does, this is going to be disgusting. It's pretty much going to be a void version of chain reaction. So this is basically just going to be a void forbearance. And on top of that, it has the origin trait field tested, so you deal damage with this, you're just going to get increased reload speed, which is obviously really good for a waveframe GL. On top of that, you can get increased reload speed via stats for all. You get ability, energy, and wellspring, more reload speed with threat detector. You got field prep for more ammo reserves and reload speed. This is just going to be a pretty solid workhorse of a waveframe GL. You know, to be fair, I'll put it down to S tier. And then we'll also put this next GL, the Arc Prodigal Return, also in the S tier. Again, I'm just a really big fan of GLs, and this one has some insane stuff on it. Now, this thing has access to Volt Shot. Is that special? Kinda. But we also have the Salvager Salvo already, which gets Chain Reaction, in addition to Ambitious Assassin, which makes for a better ad clear GL, in my opinion. But this thing is still very good, and you got access to really good perks and lead from gold, field prep. If you want to build into that Volt Shot, you got a reload perk and threat detector. Also, this thing has a new Envious Assassin, so you can overflow its magazine and have built-in auto-loading holster as well. But remember, you gotta reload for that Volt Shot to proc. And I'm also a very big fan of Demolitionist. Very good grenade energy, and also being able to instantly reload it on command by throwing a grenade is awesome. And then it's also can be pretty good for Crucible. It's also craftable, so you can put Disruption Break on it, so you can just hot swap with it in Crucible. So then you can put on Quick Launch with the Handling Masterwork and Enhanced Threat Detector, and then you can hot swap pretty well with that little combination right there. Next up, we got another returning reprised weapon, the 180 RPM Solar Hand Cannon, the Trust. This thing is legendary, not only literally, but also figuratively. So this thing is from Gambit, that's why it has a million perks, so it's also going to be dropping like candy from every single Gambit completion. Now this thing, it has a lot of S tier amazing perks. So why is it only A tier? It's because it's a 180 RPM hand cannon, quite possibly the worst archetype in the game for both PvE and PvP. Just a terrible archetype. I really want to love 180 RPM hand cannons. I save them in my vault. I use them. I want to love them, but they just do not put in the work like you'd want them to. Like in the first column for Crucible, we got things like opening shot, snapshot, slideways, rapid hit, surplus, heating up. So many good options. In the right column, you got rangefinder, Eye of the Storm, and every damage perk under the sun. If you can get Frenzy to proc, that's just free 3 taps at the base. Harmony's 3 taps, every single damage perk here is going to allow a 3 tap. For PvE, you have Incandescent, Golden Tricorn's 50% damage buff, you got Rampage, you got Explosive Payload, Dragonfly. I want to love this thing, I really do, but 180 RPM hand cannons just aren't that good, unfortunately. Like, this thing seems appealing, and you're going to have fun with it for a day or two, but then you're going to put it down and forget about it. Next up, we got the Jorams Claw Adaptive Frame Pulse Rifle from Iron Banner. This could be a reprise weapon, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it is. This thing, I think I'll put it in the C tier. You know, it's really good. It is consistent, has good stats, and this thing can get 100 recoil direction easily and feel great and feel consistent. But there's just so much it's competing with. There's a lot of other good pulse rifles. It does have kill clip. It does have head seeker. It's great, you know. But a lot of other pulse rifles do as well. Like, you got good PvE perks in Incandescent, Golden Tricorn. Encore's pretty solid, but pulse rifles aren't good in PvE. So it is pretty good, but there's just too much it's competing with, and there's nothing really special about it other than the fact that it gets Skulking Wolf. Next up, we get the Philotactic Spiral 340 RPM arc pulse rifle. And you know how I went on and on in this video about pulse rifles not being good in PvE? Well, this one defies all that logic. This one is going up to S tier. So this thing is craftable, and it's a 340 RPM pulse in the energy slot. You know, the good pulses in the kinetic slot are things like No Time to Explain and Messenger. If you don't really have a God Roll, Premonition, or Stars and Shadow in the special slot, you know, you now have this thing to craft for the God Roll with Kill Clip and Tunnel Vision. Or again, if Keep Away works in Crucible like we think it does, if it's really good, that's going to be awesome. Very, very good Crucible pulse rifle, but for PvE, this is where it gets interesting. So this thing has access to Volt Shot. It jolts things, one of the best add clear perks in the game. Now, pair that with Compulsive Reloader for plus 50 reload speed if your magazine is above 50% capacity. That is some very fast reloads, very fast jolting. That's going to be a pretty good add clear for a pulse rifle. Now, here is where I get triggered. I don't know why Bungie decided to do this, but because of this combination, you know, you want more in your magazine, so you have Compulsive Reloader longer. You want more reload speed. So the perfect magazine perk to pair with this would be Tac Mag. But for some weird reason, this is the one weapon in the entire game of Destiny 2 that does not get Tac Mag for some weird reason. But at the very least, you can put on Flared Magwell for plus 15 reload speed. So pair that with the Compulsive Reloader, and that is 97 reload speed. That is going to be instant, really, really fast reloads paired with Volt Shot. And on top of that, for even more add clear, you got the Origin trait Nanotech Tracer Rockets. Turns your next shot into a homing micro rocket when you land multiple hits. So that plus this, plus this, plus this, that is going to be nasty for add clear. Next up, we got the Bosso Ostinato Void Rapid Fire Frame Shotgun. This thing I'm putting in the trash tier. Rapid fire frames, they're difficult to make work, you know? And the downside about these is that they have terrible base handling, so that doesn't really help the fact that it gets perpetual opening shot for Crucible. I did hear rumors that the rapid fire frames are pretty good in Crucible right now, but still, just the overall stats are just very bad. And for PvE, you do have 1-2 punch, but you do not have auto-loading holster, so you gotta rely on something like Grave Robber. But this thing does have the new destabilizing rounds, which could be interesting, and especially you got lead from gold too. But I think that I would prefer Demolitionist on a Void Shotgun, and I went over that, and I went over why in my Gear Falcons Hauberg video. Again, I don't mean to do a shameless plug, but Demolitionist feels a lot better for that grenade spam when you pair it on a Void subclass because of Devour. Now, I could be wrong, but I think this shotgun is pretty bad. Next up, we got the hand-in-hand arc aggressive frame shotgun. This thing I will put into probably the B tier. Like, it's not amazing, but it's not bad. So where is it at here? Hand in hand. So this thing is not really meant to be a PvE shotgun. Doesn't really get too much. Like, it does have 1-2 punch, but again, no auto-loading holster. So it's very comparable to the disappointment of the Mindbender's Ambition Adept, except this thing gets Slide Shot, which is a very, very strong shotgun perk, but it also has Elemental Capacitor, so specifically if you're using it on Arc, you get that plus 50 handling, which is massive. So if you're on Arc, this is like an S tier shotgun, but if you're not, then it's pretty laughable. Next up, we got the Reprised Hero's Burden. I'm going to put this one in the B tier. It's good, but it's not good compared to the Funnel Web. I think the Funnel Web is going to be the better 900 RPM Void SMG. for PvE, especially with subsistence and adrenaline junkie, also for PvP because of perpetual rangefinder. It's just a lot better. You know, you have Vice Stinger, even though it got nerfed, it's still good. Subsistence is S+ tier perk. And you got that damage buff and adrenaline junkie. And when you're using Void, you're going to be using Devour builds. You're going to be using grenade spam, and adrenaline junkie synergizes with that. Now, this one has stabilizing rounds now, so you're going to have more funny, volatile collats to happen in PvE, but you don't have the damage buff, you don't have adrenaline junkie, you don't have subsistence, you have feeding frenzy. So it's just not good compared to the funnel web. And, you know, for PvP, you do have things like Zen Moment Kill Clip, which is pretty interesting. And I like that, but, you know, I think there are better options. Next up, we have the Void 750 RPM reprised title SMG. This thing is going in the trash tier immediately because, again, Void SMG for PvE competing with the funnel web. Funnel web is just better. For PvP, you also have Perpetual Rangefinder as a 750 RPM, though you're also competing with the Ikelos SMG, which is just dramatically better because you can craft the God roll and it's got just generally better stats and a much stronger origin trait. This thing's stats are lacking and its perks are lacking compared to its competitors. Next up, we got the Dimensional Hypotrochoid, the new heavy Waveframe GL. You know what we're gonna do? Add a row above. And we're gonna call this King of Gods in all caps. And this thing is going up there. It stands above almost all other weapons in Destiny 2. Now again, it's a wave frame grenade launcher as a heavy. Similar to the Forbearance, a wave frame that also has chain reaction. Breach loaded wave frame grenade launchers usually have 1 in the mag, but having 5 and having the option to go with the backup mag to put 6, disgusting. It's gonna be so dirty for AdClear. And like Forbearance heals you because it has that origin trait, but this thing can heal you as well with Unrelenting. And this thing is also craftable. You can put field prep, but you can also put enhanced field prep to get even more in the reserves. So you can spam that AdClear a lot more. This thing's gonna be your main AdClear, and then you can go ahead and run double special like an Izanagi's Burden or Riptide and another fusion rifle, 1-2 punch shotgun. You can even run Forbearance and just go the double waveframe setup. It's gonna be absolutely disgusting. Next up, we got the Marcelian C heavy grenade launcher. This one is going immediately into the trash tier. We go from King of Gods all the way down to trash tier in a split second because this thing, it's just competing with too much. You know, we just got the Wendigo, which is insane, and another GL we're going to talk about in a second, which is just another Wendigo. This thing is craftable, but there's not much special about it. You know, Incandescent is interesting for AdClear, but you also got the Crime Mutiny. You got the Love and Death, which can get auto-loading chain reaction as a solar GL, and this is a solar GL. So there's just too much it's competing with, and it doesn't do anything special. Next up, we have the Regnan heavy grenade launcher. Now this one is probably going to go into the God tier as well because Wendigo's God tier, and this thing is just another Wendigo. You know, the Wendigo, what was sought after is auto-loading Explosive Light, or you have like auto-loading Cascade Point. You can craft this thing too, so you can just throw that spike nade, so you don't have to farm for the God roll, it's just automatically there. So it's just a Void Wendigo. And on top of that, for AdClear, you know, the Wendigo had chain reaction in its left column, which kind of hurt the AdClear potential because you would want auto-loading plus chain reaction. But this thing's AdClear perk is in the right column, the stabilizing rounds. So Final Blow is going to make the surrounding targets volatile, so you just shoot the area and boom, everything explodes because this thing has splash damage. Compared to the other weapons on this list that had destabilizing rounds that shot bullets, this thing actually shoots an explosive projectile, so it's going to work differently. It's going to work similar to that waveframe grenade launcher, the harsh language we talked about earlier. Except I would normally say don't pay attention to any other perk than auto-loading holster, but actually Repulsor Brace is interesting here because the destabilizing rounds itself is going to make things volatile and cause them to explode. And then the Repulsor Brace can see that and be like, oh, you killed a volatile target, here's an overshield. So simply just shoot it at a group of ads and you instantly get an overshield. That's going to be pretty amazing. Next up, we got the Circular Logic Strand Heavy Machine Gun. And this thing, I think I'm going to put it in the C tier. It's interesting, but it's not like amazing. It's a 450 RPM machine gun, and those used to be meta in Crucible, and they could still be, and Target Lock just straight up ups that TTK, so it is a very solid strand machine gun for Crucible. And but we did get that update recently, that sandbox change that is now making the 360 RPMs have a higher TTK in Crucible, in addition to them just naturally having more ammo efficiency and higher range. And there's another machine gun that we'll talk about in a second about that. But this is still a pretty good PvP machine gun. But for PvE, you know, you do have interesting things like Golden Tricorn, Demolitionist, and Hatchling that would seem interesting. But for PvE, I would not ever consider a machine gun that didn't have either auto-loading holster, subsistence, or demolitionist or field prep in the first column, and this one has none of those. It does have nanotech tracer rockets, but again, I think the first column is really suffering here. Next up, the reprised Swarm Adept. This one I will put at the S tier. Now, just like I mentioned a second ago, this is what I was talking about, how 360 RPM machine guns got buffed to be the new highest TTK of Crucible machine guns with better range and better ammo efficiency than the 450 RPMs, but this one also has target lock. They gave this thing target lock that is just upping your TTK for essentially free, in addition to the first column having dynamic sway and rangefinder. So nasty Crucible roll. Now, I have to do some testing, because I did just make a video recently about every weapon getting a buff in Lightfall. Again, shameless plug, I'll link it up above in the card if you want to check it out. But I talked in that video about how Quillam's Terminus is going to be the new best Crucible machine gun. It's a 360 RPM, but it gets Killing Tally and Unrelenting, so you get some health regen when you go on a Guardian killing spree. Killing Tally, once you get it going, is probably going to be better than Target Lock. But at the base level, if you are somebody who prefers neutral game, then Target Lock is probably going to be your best friend here. So that's pretty much it for the Swarm. Not too much going for it for PvE. There are better options. Next up, we got the Caretaker Solar Sword, and this thing is going in the trash tier because the Solar Scar is just straight up an upgrade to this if you kept the roll with Chain Reaction. This thing is incandescent, but I think I still prefer Chain Reaction. This thing does have synergy with your solar builds though. Pair that with Tireless Blade or Relentless Strikes, it could be decent for ad clear, but it doesn't do anything that other swords can't already do. Next up, we have the Nos Reddened Sword. This thing is also going in the trash tier because there's just not too much special about it other than its origin trait field tested. So when you deal damage with it, it's going to increase the charge rate of it, so you can spam your heavy attack more than you can with other swords. Pair that with Relentless Strikes and Whirlwind Blade, and you got some good DPS for a sword, but it's still not going to beat out exotic swords. And it's also an adaptive frame. It's not like a Whirlwind Blade, so you can't really spin to win. So its power attack may sometimes whiff and not be as strong as you want it to be. Now, this perk Valiant Charged was also on this other sword we just talked about. Don't know exactly what that does yet, if it's going to, like, it says that if you block, it's going to increase the sword lunge distance. I don't know if that's going to be to the same degree of Eager Edge or perhaps stronger to cause for some skating techniques, but it just doesn't seem like it'd be that good anyway. Alrighty, we are finally done here. That took a long time to record. That took over 2 hours and a lot of editing and preparation and, you know, looking up all these god rolls and studying them for a bit before I started to record. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button for this one. It took a lot of work. So I hope the videos helped you out and I hope you learned something new. And yeah, there's a lot of crazy weapons this season, especially in the God tier and the King of Gods tier. I'm very excited to get my hands on these weapons. And if you're new to this channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. What we do here is we do a lot of build videos and we do a lot of weapon review videos. So you best believe once I get my hands on some of these God rolls, I'm going to make videos on them and do builds with them because that's what we do. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like I said, be sure to hit the like button and drop a comment because interacting with the video in those kinds of ways really helps the algorithm and the video's performance. And with that, I will catch you in the next video. A lot of Lightfall content on the way. See ya!